Listen to this podcast, or I'll gut you.
Welcome back, Horror Hounds, to Ghostman and Rivera's Horror Show podcast.
I'm Mike Ghostman Pickle.
And I'm James Rivera. Today we are going to be discussing 2021 horror movies to catch all you horror junkies out there up on what's currently playing. Spoiler, we're not going to be discussing A Quiet Place 2. Today we'll get to that some other time.
Yeah, it's the good, the bad, and the ugly of new horror films.
All right. So, let's get into it. All 2021, am I correct?
Yeah. And I have them in the order of when they were released. So the first one that was released out of these three was Willy's Wonderland.
All right, Willy's Wonderland. Let's get into this one.
All right, Willy's Wonderland was directed by Kevin Lewis and written by G.O. Parsons, who is actually an actor, and this is his first feature, and I can tell. Stars Nicolas Cage and Emily Tosta. That's really the only ones worth mentioning. I hate to say that, but Emily Tosta was in Mayans, and she was also in the Party of Five reboot. I didn't even know there was a reboot. But Nicolas Cage plays a mute janitor who is tricked into a janitorial job at the condemned Willy's Wonderland and is attacked by the possessed animatronics. Now, first thing I have to say about this movie, I thought about this about halfway through it. I'm like, okay, when executing a tired premise, not only is it a tired premise, it's one that's been done very recently, at least twice. Mm-hmm. But in order to do a tired premise like this, you must rise above it and do something beyond the premise. And what they did here is just throw Nicolas Cage in and hope it works. Mm-hmm. You know, because his lame dances at the pinball machine were all improvised, and Nicolas Cage fought for this movie like he insisted on becoming a producer because he was protective of the script. Like, you were protective of this script? That was the weakest part of it.
Well, yeah, I'm not a fan of it either. It's weird because there's nothing about this movie, because I don't try to be harsh, but there's nothing about it that strikes me as particularly bad per se, but there's nothing particularly memorable about it either. And I found myself, as I was watching it, sometimes with forgettable movies, I watch them, I'm engaging with them while they're on, and when it's over, they kind of evaporate from my head in the next few days. I kind of forget. This was kind of evaporating from my head as I was watching it play out. Nicolas Cage, who has been wonderful lately, I'm obviously Mandy, his most recent performance in film is fantastic. Did really good work in Color Out of Space, which was also a really good, excellent movie. Yeah. This just seems to be falling back onto the Nicolas Cage, the meme Nicolas Cage, not the actor. Don't get me wrong, Mandy and Color Out of Space had Nicolas Cage going for, doing the Rage Cage thing, really going for it. But I felt that those two movies and those filmmakers actually found a way to tap into some kind of real emotions underneath that. I do think that over the top hammy acting that looks bad can actually be very good if you look underneath the surface. And I think that Nicolas Cage is doing that, on the surface seeming to be wild and crazy, but underneath there's simmering emotions, there's feeling, there's a lot of heart. And I feel like Mandy has that in spades. Color Out of Space also had it too. Not as much, but it still was a very strong Nicolas Cage performance. This is just falling back on what we think of as Nicolas Cage being kind of a meme joke, and I think that's what weakens it. And on top of it, you revert to that, and then you rob him of one of the things that might actually bring some camp enjoyment to the performance of the film, which is his voice, his vocal performances. The Rage Cage, the over the top. So it's just Nicolas Cage mugging for the camera, and it's a character that you could tell is written to be like this very mysterious outsider, you know who they are, and it just comes across as goofy, and you have a hard time caring about this backstory. And I get the feeling that the movie wants you to care about his history, who he is, but I don't really think it's successful at doing that.
Well, with Mandy and Color Out of Space, I mean, it was the Nicolas Cage, but it was the Nicolas Cage that we loved. It took his best characteristics and amplified them for horror purposes.
And there's
but
emotion underneath it too.
Yeah, but with this one, it magnified what was cheesy about him, and it magnified all the reasons why the public kind of fell out of love with him for a while, and they fell in love with him again with these horror films. And this was just trying to exploit that and just doing it all the wrong ways.
Yeah, I think so. And it is another thing. It is a tired premise, but I don't think that necessarily means that it's going to be a bad movie because the premise is tired. It's all up to a filmmaker and a screenwriter what you're going to do with the premise, what you're going to do to inject it. And I don't think this really adds much to the formula. The female cop character is I get that they're trying to give her a lot of gravitas in this movie, but I don't really think it comes across very well. I found it really hard to care about most of the backstory. And as a certain point in the movie, I was just waiting for it to end. And like, there was like 20 minutes left, and every couple of minutes I kept checking on, you pull it up just to see how much longer do I have to go? How much longer do I have to go? And I just felt myself forgetting it while it was going along, not caring and waiting for it to end. And it just was a big disappointment. I do think that like I said, I do think that there is a potential in something like this, especially you got something with Nicolas Cage, but you could have done so much more with this, and it's so undercooked and underdeveloped that it's hard to care about anything that seems to be going on. And I don't think this is going to be controversial, me saying this either, because from what I see online in horror groups, the discourse around this movie, the movie has some defenders and some people who like it, as every movie will. But overall, the consensus seems to be that horror fans are not responding to this very well across the board. This is what I seem to notice, and I think there's good reason for the horror community not having much of a response to this movie, or a good one anyway.
Well, every movie, all three movies that we are going to discuss this week, I watched every one of them twice. Mm-hmm. And this was by far the most excruciating to watch a second time.
I imagine it might be worse the second time.
Yeah, I was wide awake and I was still nodding off.
Mm-hmm.
And it's through most of the movie, it's gimmick after gimmick after gimmick, and everything that happens comes off as a gimmick. And then you have Emily Tosted did do well as she could with the material, but she was an amateur fake bad girl as far as the direction goes.
And I think she was. I think that it was actually a good performance, but there's only so much that you could do with what the script is giving that actress. So I actually do think that she has potential and she could have done good, just not in this movie and not the direction that they're taking it in.
And what's weird, I found out that this script, for quite a while, it was on the most anticipated unproduced scripts in Hollywood, and it was floating around like a bunch of people wanted it. I was like, why? Because I didn't see anything in it.
This might have been, if it's been floating around Hollywood for a while, this could have been before I can't even remember the titles, but I know the recent one that took that old kids children's program.
Yeah, the Banana Splits movie.
Banana Splits one. I'm guessing since it's been in Hollywood for a while, at the time there wasn't as many of these, but I feel like now it might have become too late. I think Hollywood might have jumped on this one a little too late then.
Yeah, and there was one called Puka on Hulu. I actually haven't seen it, but I've heard a lot of good things about it, and I guess there's a Puka Part 2 as well. But the monsters in this were lame. Like that ostrich monster, and they had stupid lines. Like, they kept going to this well again and again where Nicolas Cage will be looking around, he'll hear something, and then you'll see the animatronics in the background all still and frozen. And then when he turns the other way and he turns back around, they're there. Mm-hmm. And they do that a few times, and then every time he turns around, one of them has a stupid line, like that ostrich monster, I'll feast on your face. It just comes off as silly, and not even like a campy silly. It's just like dumb and amateur.
I mean, once or twice that could work, but like just to fill the movie with scene after scene, right? That like it just seems tired, and it was part of the reason, especially towards the end, I was really just sitting there, just like, waiting, shaking back and forth. I'm like, please just end already. This is over. There's no story left to tell here. There's nothing. It's at a certain point. It's one of those movies I described it. These are movies that I genuinely have a problem with. When a movie gives up the game of what it is at a certain point early on, and it becomes very clear that the rest of the movie is just going to be repeating what you've seen up until a point when it's on autopilot, those are the types of movies that I really don't respond to. And this one really kind of has that in spades. And it's not a good thing to have. Not a good thing to have.
Yeah, and you have that gimmick where the character turns around and suddenly a monster as animatronics is there. They keep repeating that. They kept repeating the close-ups of the pinball machine, especially the cleaning of it. Tons of cleaning montages of him just cleaning rooms. How many of those montages were there? Like 3 or 4, dude? Like long montages of him just cleaning a room spotless. Like that was uninteresting. And then the dance numbers at the pinball machine, they were all improvised.
Mm-hmm.
But wow, and he actually one of the main reasons why he was drawn to this is because he was mute throughout. He wanted to do like a silent movie type of performance, but man, it was just bad decision after bad decision.
I could see the appeal of that. I could definitely see why the mute aspects would interest him and that kind of going for a silent movie performance. But it needs to be in a movie with a better grounding, a better script, and a more fully realized version of that character. As it is, I barely understand what Nicolas Cage, who he was, what his function was. And I don't think that the way they set him up to be like kind of like the man with no name kind of quality, or like Beatrix Kiddo and Kill Bill, the bride before we know her name. I get the feeling that they're going for something like that. And the difference is like Clint Eastwood and Uma Thurman as their characters in those films really had you interested in their past. You really were, you could see in their acting, even when they were silent, then they're not silent roles, you could see the actors internalizing a lot. You can imagine what they're thinking, what they're going through. You can even somewhat kind of like kind of get in their headspace a little bit. And they're really cool. They come across cool. This seems like a watered down, very unformed version of that type of archetype, that type of that type of mysterious hero who nobody knows anything about, but obviously has some kind of crazy violent past.
Yeah, and the animatronics are never a threat to him.
Mm-hmm.
Like pretty much almost every time he attacks one of the animatronics, they just approach him, he sees them standing there, and he pummels them upside the head until they fall, and then he bashes their heads in. He does it almost on every one.
That's why there's not really much tension at the end, and why I was waiting for it to end. It's just because I didn't really feel like he was in danger at any point.
Yeah.
Therefore, you know, horror movies, even if you know that it's going to end good, you still have to make the audience feel like there's the possibility that, hey, it might not. You need to feel the threat. And this did not feel it. He dispatched everything too easily that it just seemed almost pointless as a horror movie. And then it dives into that one thing that I've seen done too many times, and I don't really care for it anymore at this point, where the whole they're not locked in there. He's not locked in there or with them. They're locked in there with him. I'm like, how many times have we heard that before? And like, okay, sure.
And what about one of the animatronics is actually the coolest looking one. It's the girl with pigtails, and she had the big doll eyes and the big doll mouth.
It's a cool design.
So, sometimes the design looked cool, sometimes it looked awful, but it did look cool sometimes. But then it was very obviously not an animatronics. They didn't even have the actress try to move like an animatronic. She was doing somersaults and gymnastics, and it was ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
But and the really bad character interactions, like the girl telling a very ham-handed telling of the story of Willy's Wonderland, and then the black dude, I don't remember the character's name, but he keeps telling everybody, let's go, let's get out of here. And a few seconds later, he's like telling his girl, let's fuck. Like, just a second ago, you were insisting that you get out of here. Now you just want to stay here and fuck? Nothing made sense.
And that scene, what happens to them when they decide to get left behind, is not very scary either. I get what they're going for. It's for that sex equals death trope that you get in a lot of slasher movies, and I get that. I feel like they were trying to like inject a little bit of that, and it just didn't seem to fit, and it seemed at odds with how the character was behaving. It's one of those, like a script contrivance. It's convenient to the plot because we want to get killed, so let's make the character act in a way that is not consistent with how they behaved through this entire script. And that's lots of things like that in here too.
And I can only think of one kill that was pretty cool. Was I won't say who it was, but it was the curb stomping in the urinal. Like he put the character's mouth on the urinal and stomped the back of his head. That was pretty cool.
It was all right.
But it was surrounded by shit.
It was all right.
But they save the worst for the end with that long, pointless Freebird sequence where they did like Rob Zombie did at the end of The Devil's Rejects, and did almost the whole song of Freebird, and it just came off as so dumb and cheesy and contrived and just lame.
And the thing is, Freebird is already like a really overused song in movies that it's almost become a cliche to use it. I think the way that Rob Zombie used it was really fresh, because it almost sounds like a cliche when it starts to play in The Devil's Rejects. You're like, oh, here we go. Here's the Freebird moment. But he actually manages to kind of invert it and flip it on its head by inserting it into a context that you're not used to seeing a song like that be used, by having it used for the killers as they go out in a blaze of glory. It's usually meant for something cheesy or emotionally uplifting, and it's one of those unique moments in horror cinema, one of those great needle drops as far as like as in the history of horror, that I don't really think you could replicate that or tap into what made that such an iconic moment for horror fans, or what makes it work so well. To just put it in here with no reason, to throw an homage to The Devil's Rejects in here, doesn't really seem to have any purpose. And the movie doesn't really have much in common with The Devil's Rejects to begin with. Not that I have a problem with movies paying homage to vastly dissimilar films, but it's just so much of the script seems kind of pointless and contrived that only piles up on top of it to make it seem even more kind of desperate. And I think that's the problem with using Freebird at that moment.
And it does seem like it wants to be a Rob Zombie movie, certain moments, but nothing works about it for me.
It's missing a lot of the grit and like that down in your bone nastiness that you get out of a Rob Zombie film, the good and the bad ones. And it doesn't really have that distinctive quality that Rob Zombie's movies have.
And I don't understand with such a simple premise why they couldn't get more creative with the kills and more brutal. I don't understand why they keep going back to the same well over and over again, just bashing heads in.
Mm-hmm. Because it's a movie that mostly feels like it's on repeat for most of its running time. It's stuck in the same mode, and it never changes. Like I said earlier, it's the type of film that gives up the game at a certain point about what it is, and it becomes very clear to the viewer that this is what the movie is going to be for the rest of the runtime, and there is no surprise left in store for the audience, and there's nothing new that's going to change the story or turn it on its head. It just becomes it becomes what it is at a certain point, and then just coasts the rest of the movie on that.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing very enjoyable about it on the first watch, and then the second watch, when I was analyzing it, it gets even worse. Because when you the closer you look at it, the worse it gets.
I would not sit through this a second time. Kudos to you. Like you're but yeah, I wouldn't sit through this again.
Well, with me, I wasn't going to sit through it again, but I was like, I'm going to trash this movie. If I'm going to trash it, I'm going to go through and outline all the things I thought were bad about it.
We're not trashing. We're just trying to give honest, constructive criticism. I don't believe in trashing movies. I've come across harsh in the past, and I don't, like I said, I understand that every movie, and I'll say it again, takes a lot of effort and a lot of talent behind it. I just feel like the talent and the effort that went into this movie would have best been served by a different script, a different story, fresher, newer ideas. I just feel like it's a waste of the talent here, because technically it doesn't look bad as a movie. It's well shot. Like, it doesn't have, like, it's not a quote unquote, earlier I said bad film, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be entertaining just because it's not bad. You have to be more than just not bad. You have to be interesting. And that's what this movie is not. It's not interesting. That's my big gripe with it. There's nothing interesting going on. You're like, okay, it's a finely executed version of what it is and just repeat it over and over and over and over. And like I said, the movie, like my rant right now, is endless and keeps going on and on.
Yeah, the camera work is actually pretty good, and it looks
Yeah.
good. And with a better script, it would have been a really good movie.
Yeah, from a technical perspective, I think these filmmakers got the idea down. It's just, I wish they would have spent more time with the script. I wish they would have freshened up the story. I wish they would have spent more time with the actors. And I wish they would have came up with a more variety of kills. And I wish they would have exploited the possibilities of the premise. Because as tired as it is, there's something you could do with crazed animatronic Chuck E. Cheese style creatures running around. That's creepy.
Yeah.
There's potential in it. You could wring something out of it. I don't think this movie does that. It just, that's what it does. It doesn't seem to know what it wants to do with its premise. It just coasts on its premise without really doing anything to like liven it up or give it an injection of some life or some kind of twist or inversions or anything. Like, I think that's the biggest problem. It just hasn't been there, done that, and we have nothing new to show you kind of quality. Oh, and here's Nicolas Cage being Nicolas Cage, but he's silent.
Yeah, and within the first couple scenes, we've shown you everything we're going to show you in the movie, and you just go on repeat and kind of coast through the rest of it.
Yeah. But I mean, it is what it is. Hopefully this team, if they make another film, could do a more interesting, something a little bit more interesting next time.
Because I complained about all the lame cleaning montages and all the shots, the dancing scene at the pinball machine. They're all well filmed and well done. In a better context, it would have been much more effective, but it's just a lame context.
But they're kind of pointless. At the end of
Yeah.
the day, they just feel pointless to the story and doesn't really add anything.
Yeah, and only one well-designed animatronics, and she didn't look like an animatronic.
Yep.
Okay, so we'll leave that movie alone. We raked it over the coals enough.
Yeah.
Now the next one I like much more is Army of the Dead, directed and co-written by Zack Snyder. Now this one I put 2 watches in, so that's 5 hours I put into this movie this week, and I'll be damned if it wasn't better the second time.
It was?
Yeah.
Okay.
Actually, very enjoyable, and I found less problems with it the second time.
Interesting.
Is co-written by Shay Hatton, who wrote John Wick 3, and he's also writing John Wick 4 and 5. And is also co-written by Joby Harold, who's a producer on John Wick 3. So I guess he done some passes on it. I must say, an excellent cast, and they get even better on the second watch. You got Dave Bautista, awesome leading man, great acting in this one. Ella Purnell plays his daughter. She was really good. Omari Hardwick played Vandero. He's the black guy. He kind of looks like Michael Jai White to me, like a younger, more cut Michael Jai White. But he was awesome, and he was one of my favorite characters. Ana de la Reguera was Maria. He was a really good character, good acting. Matthias Schweighöfer as Dieter, probably my favorite character of the movie. Nora Amazeder plays Lily, the coyote that takes them into Vegas. Garrett Dillahunt from Raising Hope, and he's on Fear the Walking Dead. He played a great corporate evil asshole. Raul Castillo was really good as Mikey Guzman. Another one of my favorite characters, Tig Notaro as the helicopter pilot. She was awesome. Every time she was on the screen, I was laughing, I was entertained. And I seen a meme with her on it soon after the release of this movie, and it had a picture of her from the movie, and it said, "I want to see Tig Notaro remake every Tom Cruise movie," and I would so be there. Her in Top Gun, that would be awesome.
I think Tig Notaro is probably my favorite character.
Yeah, she was awesome. And then finally, Samantha Wynn as Chambers, kind of a small part, but she is badass and has a really good, one of the best fights with zombies is with this chick. She fights a bunch of zombies in it. So the premise is, after a zombie outbreak causes Vegas to be quarantined and cut off from the rest of the world, a group of mercenaries are hired to go in and pull off a multi-million-dollar heist at a prominent hotel casino. Suspicious Minds, first of all, opens and closes the movie. And then we also see this same song used in the next movie we're going to discuss. And I thought it was much better used in that movie. But you got Suspicious Minds playing with the guy getting roadhead. And then, goes back and forth between the soldiers. And then this is one of my first problems comes in. And you see it throughout the rest of the movie. You got too many people calm when there's immediate danger. You got the military guy on the phone. He's on the phone with his dispatch. She's screaming at him to get the hell away from that convoy right now. And he's like, huh? What? Huh? And then all of a sudden when the zombie attacks, he knows what a threat it is. He's telling the other soldier, no, we have to run. So why did he not know it was enough of a threat to run and get out of there? But all of a sudden now he knows that there's a threat. And then you see that through, especially in the climax, when we're running out of time, people way too calm and meandering around and talking where there's immediate danger. But that's a small complaint because there was so much great stuff going on. So in the middle of that awesome scene, you have a pretty scary attack with that main zombie, and then a gnarly-ass jaw rip, but I thought it was done really well. And then you have the zombies descend onto Vegas. I got so excited to see these ultra-fast zombies running into Vegas and just fucking people up while they're at the craps table and slot machines. But then they start rushing through it all. They do this one huge title sequence. First of all, they should have shown the zombies descending onto Vegas. And then there's at least 4 to 5 scenes in the title sequence that they should have shown at least 1 or 2 of them. But instead, they have the 2 songs play almost in their entirety. You got big budget action sequences going on during this title sequence. You're introducing some of the main characters who you're not only introducing them, but having the actors pose in front of photo backdrops, which was ridiculous to me.
Okay.
And then
I'll get into
on top of that, you have very emotional scenes happening during this title sequence. So I was so frustrated during that because they kept showing all these compelling scenes. I said, oh, stop, I want to see that. Stop, I want to see that. So they kind of go through a lot of the story where they could have showed just two good solid scenes,
Mm-hmm.
and then a small title sequence, and then get into the movie. They didn't have to make it this long 2-song title sequence.
I agree. And my thing with that opening sequence is, and look, everybody has their own directorial styles and choices, and I'm not one to say how you should choose to direct your film. I just noticed this as a Snyder, and I like Zack Snyder, but I just seem to notice this about him is that he has this tendency to like give you these really, really cool visuals and like really get you excited, and then to push it past the point where you kind of feel like the scene's over and it's time to move on. Where I kind of wanted to stop. It's weird because it rushes through some stuff that it didn't bother me as much as it did you, but I did want to see some stuff, develop a little bit more. So it kind of rushes through this, and it takes too long to get through at the same time. And this just seems to be a part of Zack Snyder's style. He's a very self-indulgent director where he likes to really get down and swim in his style. And it looks cool, don't get me wrong. I see what he's going for in that opening sequence. I just think that it could have been cut a little bit shorter. I don't think it needed to. I don't know many filmmakers who would have the balls to put 2 songs, and to let them play the whole way. To be one thing, like kind of Pulp Fiction does it at the opening credits where they use Miserlou, and then they kind of like fade into Jungle Boogie. Like, like half and half. No, this is gonna let you see the whole thing and then a whole other song. And you're looking at and I'm not one to judge runtimes, but I'm like, it's already a long movie as it is. Is this why it's going to be long? And it was like, interesting. But yeah, it goes a little bit too long. There's a lot of cool stuff in there, and it's very visually striking, and it's very Zack Snyder. So I think if you're a diehard Zack Snyder fan, you're probably not going to have any complaints about that opening sequence. However, if you're a Snyder hater, it's probably going to drive you insane. And if you're in the middle, like me and Michael, then you'll probably have a reaction somewhere between that.
Yeah, it's really not much of a critique against the movie for me, because I think it's actually a testament to how good the movie really is that I got turned off so much by so many scenes in the opening, the opening few scenes, that the fact that the movie was able to recover from turning me off so much and still be so entertaining is a testament to how good a lot of it is.
Mm-hmm.
And I had another problem when the daughter was introduced. First of all, the daughter, really good acting. I like her story. But that moment when she taunts the guard and risks getting shot, because she was in a situation where it's kind of a pandemic situation where they're afraid that people have this zombie virus. So they could shoot you on spot and no questions asked. So the daughter kind of taunts this asshole. And then immediately after taunting him, the girl, her friend, is getting onto her about doing something so dumb. And then she turns right around and says, "Don't do anything stupid." So that was kind of weird for me. Mm-hmm. But that was followed by the gathering of the team sequence. We've seen it tons of times, the gathering of the team. The main
has it.
Yeah, every heist movie has the guy going around and recruiting his team. Well, this was especially entertaining, especially Tig Notaro's part of it. The way she says, "Yes, I'll do it." Yeah. It's going to be dangerous. We might die. Yes, I'll do it. I need the money. But really good acting from everyone throughout the whole sequence. A lot of emotion from Batista. I was pretty impressed. But then they follow that by a really bad female singer singing a folky version of Bad Moon by Creedence Clearwater Revival while they're doing the weapons montage. That was kind of lame.
I might have liked the sequence more if they just used the original
exactly
version. I honestly think that's all it would take to fix that scene for me. Just use the original version and you're cool.
It would.
Yeah, actually, yeah.
And there was another part that kind of turned me off when they were telling them how the mission was going to go down, and they kind of showed them doing a mission, just showed a version of them doing the mission. I thought that was kind of lame. And then that was followed by another folky female singer singing a version of The End by The Doors. That came off as really lame. And I was like, I'm being turned off by this movie so much, but I'm still enjoying the hell out of it. And then I'll be done right after that scene. Zombie tiger.
What's interesting to me is that I think this is a really flawed and self-indulgent film, and it's filled with the stuff that you'd expect from Zack Snyder, for better or worse. And like I said, if you're a Zack Snyder fanboy, you're going to be in heaven. If you're a Zack Snyder skeptic, this is not going to do anything to change your mind about that. But what I do think is, through all the self-indulgences, what kept me with it is that all of the characters are really good characters, and they're very easy to care about. Even some of the ones that are the goofier characters are a lot of fun. I'm looking up. Tig Notaro in particular is probably my favorite character, but I felt like most of the people in here has had a lovable quality. Ludwig Dieter,
yes.
That was a funny character. I got a kick out of his nervousness and his tics. I think Dave Bautista is a really good actor. I think he brings a lot of gravitas to the role. I think he's a very good screen presence. I think he's a better not trying to piss people off here, a better wrestler turned actor than The Rock is. I think that Dave Bautista, between what I've seen like of his him in Guardians of the Galaxy and his small part in Blade Runner 2049, I think this guy has a big career ahead of him in films. I think he has an instant likability. I think it's easy for an audience to take him. He projects this certain type of like toughness. Yeah, he's big, he's tough, he looks strong, but there's a certain type of warm humanity that I think shines through a lot of his performance that keeps you with it. And I think most of the cast has good chemistry. I think these are all really likable characters. They frequently make you smile throughout the thing. They say funny things. And even when the movie has its indulgences, which sure it has plenty, it also has a lot of really cool shit that's hard not to geek out on, like that zombie tiger. It sounds ridiculous and it sounds absurd, and yes, it is ridiculous, and yes, it is absurd, but it's so fucking cool when you're watching it. You can't help but get a kick out of, who does that? Put a zombie tiger in the middle of this. So there's a lot of shit in there that just, I don't know, I find it very enjoyable. Do I think things could be cut and snipped out of this movie? Yeah. Do I think some scenes could be shortened? Yes. But I think that the story and the characters are engaging, that even when the movie tests your patience in certain parts, you never get the feeling that you're giving up. You want to stick with this to the end and see it the whole way through, because there's so much chemistry between the casts.
And I love the way he presented the zombie tiger,
Mm-hmm.
because he presents it as a major threat at first, and then it kind of just chills and walks away. It kind of teases you with it twice, and then the second time it comes in, you think it's going to be a part of a big attack sequence, and then it just sits down and chills on top of a car. So he teases you, making you think, oh, I'm just going to show you this glimpse of this tiger just to add a cool element to the script, to the movie. But then you see this, in the end, you get to see this awesome, very satisfying tiger attack with somebody's face getting completely chewed off. Excellent effects, satisfying because of the character it happens to. So that I thought the use of the zombie tiger was great throughout. But I really love the Lily character, the coyote character.
Mm-hmm.
But they kind of did her dirty, because they kept making her do dumb things that would get them in trouble. Like she shoots some people and sacrifices them, and then the others who she should be much more careful about, she lets them get away with murder.
Mm-hmm.
And then one of the worst parts is when they get all the way inside Vegas, and then she decides to explain to them that there's very fast and smart zombies. So kind of way late in the game to be explaining to your crew about the fast zombies.
Mm-hmm.
But and then they had the sequence that was pretty cool with the hibernating zombies, but that was already done in The Girl with All the Gifts.
Yeah.
But it was done pretty well here. So you got the hibernating zombies. But the one thing that was a little confusing is that weird timeline theory that Bandero has, where they get to the safe and then there's some skeletons laying there, and they have all their exact same clothes on. So he explains that maybe they're in a time loop and
Mm-hmm.
keep going through this over and over again. So that was kind of weird to throw in on top of robot zombies. So you have two different things that they touch on that they could have explored somehow, but they kind of just mentioned the timeline theory, and then showed the skeletons in the same clothes.
I think that's kind of interesting that they hint at things that could have been explored more in the movie, considering this movie is already 2.5 hours long, which
Yeah.
I think most people... Have you ever seen a zombie movie that's 2.5 hours long before?
I don't think so.
I don't think that's ever been done. And I find that very interesting that they didn't explore things that they could have explored with the runtime. And the reason is, and I'm not trying, again, this is just a feature of Zack Snyder's directing. It's all the slow-mo. It's all of the extended sequences. It's his need to show you everything. He is very in love with his footage, for better or worse, and I don't think he likes cutting things. If he has a sequence he wants to show you, you're going to see the whole sequence, and the whole song is going to play through. Not only is the whole song going to play through, he might throw another one and let that play the whole way through. So I think that's where some of the problems with the indulgences. And again, these are not like deal-breaking flaws. They're just a part of Zack Snyder's aesthetic and style. And that's fine. That's his directorial style. That's his choice. But I do think that with a runtime like this, there was more opportunities to cut down on some of that and actually get in and explore some of the more interesting avenues in the story that are very intriguing, that never get a lot of airtime, like you said, like the time loop, which is an interesting theory. It feels like a little bit of a tease, and you don't really get much up on that. And the robot zombies are never really properly explained either. So my only thing is, like, who am I? I'm nobody. But like, if I was like, you have a long running time, I mean, give us a little bit more information, a little less slow-mo, and you got a better movie right there. That's that's just my opinion.
And the slow-mo was done quite a bit, like it always is with Zack Snyder movies, but it did work more in this than it didn't. There was a few scenes where it didn't, but mostly it worked for me.
Yeah, for the most part.
And one of my favorite scenes was the pressure trigger scene at the safe, where they have to go through all the booby traps in order to get through the...
Yeah, that's one of the best scenes in the movie.
So Vandero has to keep going back downstairs, getting more zombies and bringing them in to go through the pressure trigger. So that's pretty cool. But then they get a hold of the money, and why is like Guzman like making it rain when they got 20 minutes before they have to get out of Vegas before the nuclear bomb hits?
You know why? Because it looks cool. Because
Yeah.
Nightmare. That's what he
And-
does. It's the visuals.
And making it rain in slow-mo.
You know what that reminds me of a little bit? It's kind of like those 90s hip-hop music videos, the kind that P. Diddy, Puff Daddy, Diddy, whatever you want to call him, Sean Combs popularized, where he would do that thing. He kind of like make it rain, or he'd throw like money in the air and then like spin around the money in slow motion in his big shiny red suit or whatever outlandish thing he was wearing. It kind of reminded me a little bit of that, didn't it? You get like a little that sequence, you got a little bit of like a 90s hip-hop music video vibe. I don't know if that's a nod to that, but if it was, that's a very strange nod to do in the middle of a zombie epic.
Yeah, and especially when time is of the essence, you know, when the characters have to get out of there. And then that was immediately followed up by an emotional moment, like, this can wait. Like a character turns around to Batista, I didn't come for the money, I came for you. I was like, this is not the time. That can wait until the helicopter ride home, okay?
Yeah, let's just get in and get out.
But then everything I had a problem with was followed by something awesome, like the surprise neck twist, like a friggin' corkscrew, and then Batista fights this badass, I call it an MMA zombie. Like when all the fast zombies started pouring in, and he has to get in that fight with that MMA zombie, and he's doing all kinds of contortions and flipping, and that was a pretty awesome little fight right there. But I love both Dieter and Vandero. I love their whole character arcs. I love how they kind of at odds in the beginning, and then they end up bonding, and then they have that big fight at the end where both of them face off against a group of zombies. I thought every time either one of those characters was on screen, I was entertained. I mentioned the very satisfying zombie tiger attack at the end with the gnarly face chomping. It's kind of going along well, and it got to that kind of epilogue at the end, and then they threw in the acoustic version of the Cranberries' Zombie. And everyone I've talked to about that thought that was like cheesy as hell to put Cranberries' Zombie in a movie about zombies.
You know, I have a weird feeling about that. I kind of agree with the detractors, well, not agreeing with the effect of it. Is it cheesy? A little bit, yeah. At the same time, it's also kind of fucking cool. I'm not gonna lie. If I told you that I didn't find that sequence very enjoyable and it didn't make me smile, the utter lack of subtlety to just shove the song "Zombie," which is not actually about zombies, by the way, in the middle of this movie. I don't know. There's something that comes with that level of like, where like you take the good with the bad. When a filmmaker has that level of freedom to really like be self-indulgent and just go where they want. And from what I understand, I don't think Netflix. I think because of the situation with Warner Brothers and the Justice League film and how that went through a big debacle where they tried to like clamp down on Snyder's vision and ended up bringing the theatrical version, which, by the way, I know that's not irrelevant, but Zack Snyder's version of Justice League, the fantastic superhero movie. It's a better movie than Army of the Dead, by the way. But I think it's a result of all that controversy and a lot of people think, like, you know, wanting to let him unbound, that I think Netflix gave him a lot of freedom. I could tell that they didn't really step in very much. And he's even said in interviews that that what you see of this is the director's cut. He had complete freedom. And I think that you take the good and the bad when a filmmaker is just let off the leash, you know, and they're allowed to do what they want. Sure, some of it doesn't work. Sure, some of it's a little bit indulgent. But, I mean, since it's so unfiltered, since it lacks so any subtlety, there's something kind of cool about an artist not really giving a shit that that's such an odd choice and just letting it play through. And it's done so sincerely that I actually think it works. I would not take that sequence out, and I don't even think it's a problem in the movie. I think it's cool. I liked his needle drop. I liked the use of the cranberry zombie within the context of the movie. And no, out there, people, I don't think it's because Zack Snyder misunderstood the song. I think he knows that it's not actually about zombies, but fuck, it just looks and sounds cool about it. How are you not going to do it? It's just that unbridled enthusiasm that I'm going to do it because it's cool and I like it. And if you don't like it, tough shit. It's my movie.
I must admit I did like it. I mean, it did work for the scene.
Yeah.
Just the fact to think about it, putting cranberry zombie in a zombie movie sounds ridiculous, but when you're watching it, it works.
Yeah.
But it works mainly because it's not the original version of zombie, but it's still the Cranberries doing it. If it would have been like that acoustic version and some other singer would have started singing, I would have been out. But but the fact that it was another version of zombie by the Cranberries and it worked for that scene, I was down with it. I liked it.
I do think it's a bit too long. I think you could have lost 25 minutes off of this. Especially considering that extra footage, that extra time that usually zombie movies, like I said, don't take up this time. You think that might be a little bit, give you time to give more information, but instead he just uses it to more indulge in his the visual excesses that he's known for. In spite of all this, or because of it, or despite of it, I think it's a very enjoyable film. I think it goes down very easy. It's humorous, it's cheeky, it's suspenseful when it needs to be. The scenes of violence hit hard when they're supposed to. You care about the characters when bad things happen to them. I was very disappointed. Not in a bad way, but in a good way, because it's what the movie wants you to feel. There's a couple of characters that when they, and I'm not going to say who, when they bit, the one in particular that made me kind of sad to see certain characters go or die. So he does a job. You probably know who I'm talking about, but he makes you.
I actually yelled, "You assholes!"
Yeah, he actually makes you care about these people, and I think that's what makes it. And I think with all the excesses I'm talking about, I think there's like a certain kind of enthusiasm and like an infectious energy that comes from the movie that, yeah, it's excessive, but you could tell this is a filmmaker who was having fun doing what he was doing and enjoying what he was doing. And I'd rather have a filmmaker unbound, even if their movie's going to be a little bit flawed, and allow them to let their vision to flower, than have a studio clamp down and just make it some generic product. If you get what I mean. So whatever your complaints about are, you can't say it's a generic film, or that it.
Yeah, I mean, the way I see it, it's as a big budget action blockbuster, it's excellent.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very good, very entertaining. As a horror film, it's pretty good despite its flaws.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. You still there?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. I have no idea what happened. I'm gonna have to do a lot of editing. My screen, just go on. Sorry.
Oh.
I don't know what's going on today.
But I thought it was very good when you look at it as a big budget blockbuster, and it's actually the second most expensive zombie film.
Really?
Actually World War Z had a bigger budget, like 130 million, I think it was, where this one was just 90 million.
See, World War Z is kind of like Army of the Dead, like with the fast zombies, but without like the humorous self-awareness and the infectious energy that I get out of this one. I don't like World War Z, by the way.
I think this one was much better as a big budget action blockbuster and a little bit better as a horror film.
Yeah, I would think so too.
So that was our assessment on Zack Snyder's Army of the Dead. And now we get to the third and final film, one of my most anticipated horror films of the year, The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It. Directed by, I thought it was Michael Chavez, but when we had one of the actors from the movie, Ronnie Jean Blevins in, he called him Michael Chaves. So I believe it's Michael Chaves. So it's directed by Michael Chaves. He directed Curse of La Llorona. It's written by James Wan. James Wan did the story, and he co-wrote it with David Leslie Johnson McGoldrick, who did Orphan and also The Conjuring 2.
Orphan?
Yeah, he did The Orphan.
Oh, interesting.
But he also did Little Red Riding Hood, which was awful. So
okay, I never saw that one, so I couldn't tell you.
But I've liked most of what he's done, and of course we have Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga return as Ed and Lorraine Warren. Awesome in this as ever. Ruari O'Connor as Arnie. I thought his performance was really good. Sarah Catherine Hook as his fiancée Debbie Glatzel. And the little boy, her brother Julian Hilliard, he's David Glatzel, and he is actually from The Haunting of Hill House and also Color Out of Space. So he's making a pretty big impact in horror at a young age with very few projects under his belt. And he was actually surprisingly good in this. You got John Noble as Kastner, the old man, the old occultist practitioner. And then Eugenie Bondurant, good performance and excellent look from her as the occultist. Shannon Koop returns as Drew. He's been in all 3 Conjuring films. And then, of course, Ronnie Jean Blevins as Bruno.
Mm-hmm.
The premise is this is based on a famous case of the Warrens, one of their most famous. So after the Warrens perform a dangerous exorcism on the 8-year-old boy, the demon leaps into his sister's fiance. The Warrens attempt to prove that he was possessed after he kills his landlord. And in this one, much better use of old music than Army of the Dead, I thought. We open during an exorcism, so we kind of jump right into the action. And then the opening text shows you that this film is going to concentrate more on story than crafting scares. And it's going to be a different movie. And it's a very different movie to me from 1 and 2. And that's one of the reasons I liked it so much. And then you have the priest arrive. You have the homage to The Exorcist. A lot of people have pointed that out. I thought that was pretty cool little nerd moment for me. Because like in the last one, they did the homage to the Amityville Horror House. Mm-hmm. And then the little kid and stuff. So
yes, it's almost like the exact same shot with the same pose when the priest is showing up to the house. But
yeah. And then I love the part of the exorcism where they're carrying the kid through the house, and the scratches are appearing on the walls as if something's like attached to him, like scratching along the walls. I thought that was a good effect. And then there's the possession, and a lot of people have seen the pictures of the possession where it's like a CGI person kind of twisting up and contorting. Well, it's actually not CGI. Every movement during that exorcism is 100% real and practical. The only CGI used in that scene was it was a 12-year-old boy who was a contortionist, and they put the little 8-year-old boy's face on his, so that was the only CGI in that scene. But it's pretty.
Be contorting themselves like that is my question.
I know, and the director said he said that little boy should actually have his own movie. That things he's able to do with his body is just crazy.
Okay, I thought that was. I didn't think it looked fake. It looked real, but I still thought it was CGI only for the fact that it just seemed absurd to me that a little boy would be able to do that. So I was convinced that it was CGI, despite not thinking that it looked like CGI. So that's pretty interesting to know.
And then even I think the CGI in the face was made to look even better because of the quick cuts and the lighting. So you didn't really have a whole lot of time to analyze it too much or think of whether it looked real or not. But also during that scene, Lorraine starts having these visions, which I thought were very well done. They're very original, give you a certain type of feeling that I thought they were going for, and it kind of appears. It kind of was woven into the atmosphere throughout the film. So I thought when Lorraine starts having the visions and it sets a tone for the battle later in the film, I thought that was really well done. And then they have more text that comes up before the title. So that solidifies that this is going to be different. We're going to emphasize story on this one rather than scares. But they do attempt some scares, which do come off well. They're just not as finely crafted as James Wan's scares. But I think that was kind of deliberate here. I don't think they were going for big elaborate set pieces, big elaborate scares. I think they were going for kind of somewhat simple scares. And then they had that great long shot with Ronnie Blevins, where it's one long shot kind of going in and out of the rooms and the house that they're in. And they're kind of showing Arnie and his family and how they interact with Bruno. And this is the first great use of an old song. It's Baby Hold On to Me by Eddie Money. Mm-hmm. I thought that was very effective in that scene, kind of sets the tone for the whole scene. And you get to know what kind of characters these are and how they interact with each other. And then the discovery of the festering hole, and starts these little subtle scares, and then it's good jump scares that aren't as highly effective as James Wan again, but jump scares without gimmicks. I thought it was very natural. I thought the jump scares kind of rose out of the scene rather than here's a big score hit and here's a big scare, jump everybody. It wasn't like that. So I was impressed with there still being jump scares like James Wan, but I thought they were done very well and very different from James Wan. I love all the flashbacks of how the Warrens met. It's all that was real. All that was taken from her in interviews, Lorraine Warren in interviews explaining how they met. So the flashbacks were done really well, and it adds to a very romantic moment later in the film. And I think this is one of the most romantic out of the three films. I know that's not what a lot of people go to see horror films for, but I thought it was very romantic and I loved it. And then and another awesome sequence with music involving Ronnie Blevins. Blondie, Call Me. I loved it. He plays it on the record player, and then that whole sequence goes effortlessly from happy to sinister. I thought it was very well done, how it was kind of a natural progression, kind of everyone's happy, jumping around. Bruno's being a goofball like he is, drinking a little too much, and then all of a sudden it just slowly turns sinister because of the hallucinations that Arnie is having. And then there's a handful of highly memorable moments that make this movie special, where it's not as good as the other two, but I think it's still special. And the first highly memorable moment for me was when Arnie falls in the hallway and backs up into the wall in the hallway, and the window turns red. The record kind of slows down. There's a lot of overuse of that where popular songs are kind of slowed down for effect, but I thought it was done very organically here, very effective. It was instantly memorable for me. It's going to be one of those parts of the movie that I'm always going to remember. And then you see the monster kind of coming towards him down the hall. Excellent scene. I love when the Warrens are talking to the lawyer for Arnie, when Arnie's going to be put in jail, and she will not defend him. So the Warrens insist, so you come to our museum and meet Annabelle, and then if you still don't want to do the case, then do it. So then the lawyer has this silly look on her face after being in the Warrens museum. So I thought that whole scene was really good. The waterbed scene could have come off as a little hokey, but because of that little boy's acting, I thought that's what made the waterbed scene effective. It's not that scary, but it's a decent jump scare that I thought was done organically. It got me both times. Both times I watched the movie, even though I knew it was coming. That was quickly followed by a blood shower scene. Another one, a bit overdone, with water coming out of a shower head, and then it turning to blood. But again, still well done and effective thanks to the boy's acting. And then you got another little subtle scene that kind of stuck with me that I liked a lot. You remember when Lorraine is about to crawl under the house and investigate that hole in the floor? So she kind of mocks Ed for being overprotective, and then she kind of crawls under the house and rats are everywhere, and it doesn't even affect her. Kind of startles her at first, but I like the whole dynamic between the characters on that part. I love the whole storyline that they kind of added this. They kind of the original script for this movie kind of followed. They kind of went with the real guy Arnie's and his fiance. They went by their stories, and the original script was pretty much exactly what they went through. And then through subsequent rewrites, then they added stuff like the cop that comes to them and said that he finds another totem just like theirs, but it was from another case of the Warrens. So they kind of take elements of other cases of the Warrens and kind of weave it into this one, but it's mostly accurate. So another cop asked for help with the case, and I love how he tests Lorraine for her powers of being a medium. And then this is where Suspicious Minds comes in. This is the same song that opened and closed Army of the Dead, but I thought it was used more effectively here, especially since we already had a old Eddie Money song used very well once. And then plus it ties in, Elvis is kind of tied into the franchise as well, because he was prominent in part 2 when Patrick Wilson was singing the Elvis song. Another part I loved was when Lorraine was transported to these dark woods, and she kind of reenacts the murders of this cop is looking for this girl, and she kind of reenacts the murder of the girl. So you keep seeing cuts between the murder and Lorraine reenacting it. This is one we were familiar with from the trailer, but I still think it was great because of the effects and the acting, the whole cliff scene. That brings us to highly memorable moment number 2 for me, the morgue scene. So it starts with when she grabs that wet corpse's hand, and you just get this nasty kind of skin crawling feeling when she grabs it. It's like a big fat wet slimy corpse, and she grabs its hand. But the vision she has kind of takes you back to the opening scene, and then it goes back and forth between the morgue scene and then Arnie in jail. So when I love the moment when Lorraine breaks this the bond that the entity has with Arnie in jail, and then she comes face to face with the occultist, and then the occultist says, "How are you doing this?" I love that whole scene. It was even better watching it the second time, and this is immediately followed by a monstrous thing chasing them. So it's a very effective, very exciting scene. And then when Ed thinks the corpse is attacking him, when he thinks that it's attacking him, but it turns into something else. I loved all that. But this is when it really gets into the mystery of it, and this is one of the things that really stood out to me. And it was more about story and more about the investigation, like a compelling investigation when they're looking for the occultist and trying to look for her location. And then the stuff with Kastner, played by John Noble, where he explains the backstory, where, I talked about the explaining of the backstory in Willy's Wonderland was very ham-handed, not organic at all. This was the opposite. It was very organic, the way the backstory was explained. And that brings us to highly memorable moment number 3, was when Lorraine falls in the hallway. She's running from the occultist, and she's looking for the occultist, and she looks behind her to see a double of herself. I thought that was very cool and disorienting, and I love the angles that the director chose on that one. And then that leads right into the memorable moment number 4, is when the occultist, I just mentioned this just now, the occultist approaches Ed as someone else, then blows the dust in his face. I love that whole thing. And then there's a great broken body scene in the climax where kind of the tables are turned on the villain. There's a awesome broken body scene. I love that one. And then there was one that a lot of people, I understand why a lot of people might think this is cheesy, but the part with Ed's pill, where he finds where he forgot his heart pills. There's a whole storyline going on how Ed's having heart problems, and I think it did a lot for the story and a lot for the romance as well. Where somewhere where Ed finds his pill is very romantic, and it could come off as sappy, but I thought it was so damn sweet and genuine just because of how great these characters are. Another great use of a song was at the end, a little epilogue at the end, Van Morrison's Brand New Day. Perfect for a nice little scene, and then there's a gazebo there, and this is a nice sweet scene between Ed and Lorraine Warren. And then it ends with the closing title sequence, which has a real tape of the exorcism that we saw in the opening scene. So I thought that was really scary to add on there, and that's kind of actually freaking a lot of people out. And actually, when my daughter's friend works in the local theater, and she was in the theater while that scene was playing, and she said while that tape was playing, she looked over and there was someone sitting in the seat. There was nobody else in the theater, and she said someone was sitting in the seat looking at her. She thought that they had just stayed after the movie, and she kind of looked around asking, who's this person? And she looked back around and the person was gone. So I don't know if that has anything to do with the movie. I don't know my daughter's friend was tripping, but I thought that was a crazy little thing.
All right, so here's my take on the movie. You're probably going to disagree with me a lot on this one. I don't think this comes close to the first two Conjuring films by a mile. And the thing is, I actually like the first 30 minutes of this movie is the most. It's my favorite part of the movie. I love everything at the beginning. I thought it had probably a really strong opening sequence, to be honest. It might have had the strongest opening sequence of any film in the series. My issues of this movie come, and when I started researching to it, I guess it kind of makes sense, is where this veers off from the actual case. Most of the plot of this movie has very little connection to the actual case of the devil made me do it case. All right, so in the actual case, what we usually hear about this movie, and I normally don't try to tackle the true story elements of this one, but this needs to be addressed. This case is famous for being the first case where demonic possession was used in a legal system, where that was used as a defense. That is actually not true. It's the first case that was attempted, and the movie acts as if this went through. This did not happen. The judge actually rejected it right away, and they had to build their defense. They had to build it on self-defense. So the Warrens were not even actually involved in that trial at all. So anything that happens after that point, where their mystery plot and everything, has nothing to do with the actual files. And the movie acts like they presented evidence in court to try to help get this man off, and that actually didn't really happen. It was a plea of self-defense where he got 10 to 20 years. And it's that part of the movie where it starts losing me. I think it starts losing a lot of what's scary. I don't really think the plot line that they come up with after is particularly good. It does something strangely that reminds me of the original Friday the 13th, introducing a villain who you had no idea who this person was at the 11th hour, and there's no gravitas earned by that. And it just seems so ham-fisted. And I started, when I was watching this, I started to wonder, is this actually based on a true story anymore? And it turns out where my suspicions start is that is right where the movie starts veering off and creating something. There was no actual curse involved, nothing that they ever proved. So everything there, whether it's taken from other files or whatever, is not really faithful to the actual Warren case of the devil we do it.
That's not really new. That's they've done the exact same thing in 1 and the exact same thing in 2.
Okay, well, that's interesting, because I've never been compelled to actually look into it to that extent.
Yeah, because there was never any crooked man. There was never any nun. That was an image that they came up with for the movie. I mean, they took a lot of liberties. I mean, it's pretty well known that they took a lot of liberties from the beginning, and they kind of melded different cases of theirs together. And actually, I watched the documentary about them. There's at least 10 or 12 of their cases that are much scarier. Just the story of the cases are much scarier than any of these 3 movies.
And I'm wondering why they're not adapting those cases. And I'm guessing with this one, because it's probably, other than the Amityville one, it's probably the most thing that they're most, I don't know, maybe Annabelle, but it's up there. It's whatever. It's one of their 3 most famous cases, I would say. And it's just, I never got the feeling watching the first 2 Conjuring movies that it just didn't seem organic to the story. This one, I started having like weird suspicions. I was like, this can't be true. This seems way too convoluted, and it kind of isn't. And I just don't think there's much scary going on after a certain point in this movie. I loved, I think Ed and Lorraine Warren, Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga, I think they do an excellent job in the role. I think they're as good as they've ever been. But the only part that scared me after the first 30 minutes was the morgue scene. I thought that was really well executed. I thought it was suspenseful. But there's nothing else out there that I could care for. I thought the villain is so poorly developed that I really just stopped caring after a certain point, because it wasn't really an interesting character, because we never really got to know him. The twist with the priest just seemed to come out of nowhere, and it seemed ham-fisted. And it just, none of anything after the first 30 minutes just did not really ring true.
They hinted at the villain from the very first scene. I mean, they show her in Lorraine's visions from her very first vision, and every subsequent
Not-
vision after that.
But that's not enough for you to build your mystery off of it. It's not injected in it enough in a way that's organic. And I just think
How is it not though? I mean, you're just saying that, but you're not explaining why.
just showing a quick vision of something and then just kind of dropping it is not enough to bring it back at the end and make it seem like it was fully earned.
So she followed the visions up where you actually saw some of the person's lair, and then Lorraine follows it up with dialogue, and then one of the visions, she follows it up with saying there's someone doing this. Okay. So it's like hinted at through the whole thing.
But it still doesn't seem organic. That's not a good way for me.
Well, for you, that's really personal preference rather than a critique on the movie.
No, it's a critique on the movie. Look, I'm going to give my critiques on the movie. Don't say it's personal preference. I don't think it's a good choice. I think it's a bad choice. Just to it's not developed enough. It doesn't earn the gravitas. And it's hard to care about. It's not a very...
See, I think it does earn the gravitas. I mean, I explained all the different scenes, how it earned the gravitas. So
just by showing you the flashback and giving you a few pieces of dialogue, somebody's doing it. Who? Somebody we saw in a flash. Okay, that's not really enough to really develop.
And how much more were they supposed to be introduced? Were you supposed to see her, hunched over her altar making a potion, or?
I just think that plot line doesn't work. They should have found a different entry into the story.
I mean, you could have had the same critique for the witch. I mean, they didn't show much of the witch either, but
I don't really think that critique applies at all, because that movie is more of an ambiguous thing where you don't know what's haunting them. It's not a mystery film. It's not about somebody investigating, trying to get to the bottom of who's harming them. For the most part, they don't even think the shit's real because they're a religious family. So
they find the totem in the first one of the first scenes. They find the totem, and the totem came from somewhere. It's all a mystery leading up to who this villain is, and then there's a reveal of who the villain is, and it's all explained organically.
It was just somebody we saw in a quick vision at the beginning, and that totem has nothing to do with this actual.
No, it wasn't a quick vision in the beginning. It was several visions throughout, followed by dialogue, followed by her saying someone was doing this.
None of it.
Plus,
though. So just by showing a quick vision, so somebody's doing this, and now let's reveal it at the end. That's not really very well developed.
She wasn't revealed in the end. She was revealed a little over halfway through. And she was shown a few times before they ended up finding her at the end, because there was a whole mystery, like where she was and everything. I mean, it was very organically introduced and kind of built up throughout.
I think it was extremely inorganic. And not only that, what brings us down also is I understand the want to bring in the human element of having more human villains, because most of the first two Conjuring films, not that this doesn't focus on the supernatural, but most of the evil comes from the supernatural. This one is trying to bring in the more human element, provoking the supernatural, and I get that. But it makes everything seem so much smaller. It makes it seem less grand than the last two. And most of it just feels like the movie doesn't know what to do with itself after a certain point. I really like the first 30 minutes, and I don't think Patrick Wilson or Vera Farmiga have lost any of their charm. But I think this would have been better off trying to stick a little bit closer to this actual case, because it's the first time in any Conjuring movie that I started to feel like, what? This is the case? I just kept it was just weird that I had the feeling, I was like, I get the feeling that this is not really connected. I never got that in The Conjuring. Now, is it possible that I'm missing? Sure, because that's totally possible, but I never got that feeling off of The Conjuring 1 or The Conjuring 2.
What? You're going through the whole thought process that I've had since the first Conjuring was done, because I'm very familiar with the cases. So I was very aware how much the first one deviated from the case. I was very aware how much the second one deviated from the case, but so I viewed them as a standalone movie rather than viewing them as true stories. I view them as being about real people. But as far as the stories, they have so many cases that they kind of wove their some of their cases together for cinematic purposes, but also for crowd pleasing purposes. Because for me personally, I'm a big fan of the Warrens. I've studied their cases since I was in high school, and I want to see like uh, the Changeling type of movies, or The Exorcist, where it's very dramatic, very attention to detail, very true to the story, very I wanted it to be very analytical. But with something like this, is trying to get asses in the seats, you have to go for the crowd pleasing thing, and they have all kinds of material there to do it, and they have two awesome characters in the lead role to do it with.
Yeah, I mean, and it's a lot of that doesn't work for me. And then another element, and you're probably not going to like this criticism, the religious elements of this one struck me wrong and or laid on a little bit thick in a way that didn't bother me in the first two, but actually got under my claw this time around. And I know it's just a movie, but this needs to be said. There's this conversation that they're having when they're talking about how the U.S. legal system should recognize demonic possession. And the argument that Ed tries to posit forward is, well, we make people, you know how we make people swear on the Bible or whatever, that if the legal system believes in God, it's time for it to start believing in the devil. And problem I have with that is a magnificently bad idea on so many levels. And I don't like that the movies try to like shove this, that's a good idea. And The Exorcism of Emily Rose also does this. The problem with inserting something like that into the legal system is that, as far as the United States legal systems goes, there's three different things that define the country. There's the executive branch, which is the president. There's the legislative branch, which is Senate and Congress, which is what ratifies laws and puts legislation out. And there's a judicial branch, which is where criminal justice and a lot of cases are settled. And it's a very important function of government. It's the U.S. Supreme Court is part of it. All the lower level courts are all a part of the system. To introduce, the way that the legal system works is when you introduce a precedent into a legal system, people will latch onto it and repeat it over and over. If you were to produce a precedent in our legal system that says that you could recognize the validity of demonic possession or the devil, whether or not you actually believe in it, would throw the legal system into chaos in reality, and we end up with having catastrophic consequences, mostly for marginalized communities. Because I understand that there's different levels of belief, but there's a reason, and they mention in the movie, that the church has a lower threshold for evidence than the legal system does. And there's a good reason for that too. Because if we were to allow those types of arguments legitimacy in a legal system, it would be used by religious fanatics. It would be used against abortion rights. It would be willy-nilly. Such a thing would throw the legal system, the precedent it would cause, into such chaos that it would be a complete downfall of the United States. It would basically make it almost irreversible that we can make this a theocracy, and it would ruin a lot of what gives the court system's legitimacy. You need to have that level of skepticism, because if we can just say that, then people can use demonic possession anytime they want to murder somebody. Judges could use their religious beliefs, say they believe this or believe that, to restrict abortion rights. They could restrict rights for the LGBT community, women's rights. It would just be complete chaos. So movies like horror movies recommending that, and even in the good ones, my eyes roll in the back of my skull when they try to like tell you that that's a good idea. That is a terrible idea. It's not really thought through. And I don't like the idea of people watching these movies and thinking, yeah, because I believe in it, this should, like, no, it should not be inserted, because you don't know what kind of chaos you're going to introduce into the legal system by allowing such arguments to be made. And the movie pretends as if that argument was made and it was presented in court, and that's what the jury decided on. It was actually just a thing of self-defense. The Warrens had very little to do with this actual trial. So I don't like when religious horror. I don't have a problem with religious elements being introduced into horror movies, but when you're so deliberately representing that this was the actual case, and people are going to walk away And that last recording is only going to seal the deal for people who think that everything in here is actually a true story. Putting that at the end for a lot of people is going to solidify it and think that stuff like that is a good idea. It's not a good idea. It's a really bad idea. It just needs to be put out there that these arguments in horror movies for the validity of that in a legal system is something that would be catastrophic. It would be absolutely catastrophic.
Well, this was inherently part of the Warren story, though. In every one of their cases, they use their faith and their religion to battle these forces.
And that's
to admit it out of the movie would be irresponsible.
Okay, that's fine. But for them to argue that it should be introduced into the legal system is...
I mean, they didn't really argue about it. They had like two very short scenes in the courtroom. None of it was like Exorcism of Emily Rose, where it was any kind of courtroom drama. There was nothing drilled into your head in any court scene.
Okay, no, it wasn't drilled
any official capacity.
But the fact that the movie follows up and acts like that's actually all true, that this is how the case played out, lends too much validity to that. And there's too much inkling of any time that somebody, and that's fine if you have a problem with people being skeptical, but like acting like every person who has an inkling of logic or skepticism is an idiot is dumb. I don't like that. Like with the whole like, well, it could have been the whole thing with the cop picking out the weapon. That's fine, but then to try to make the cop look stupid for having doubt, you should have doubt. It's
not a horror movie's responsibility, though. They're just weaving an entertaining story.
That's fine, but if you're going to present it as a true story and then throw the argument at there, it should be just clarified for general audience. That's just what I think. Now, people are free to disagree with me on that, but those ideas bug me when they're inserted into horror movies.
But this is one of the critiques that shows me that I know you and I've seen a lot of people, they judge, for some reason, they judge the Conjuring films on a different curve than every other film. Like they hold it up to a higher standard for some reason. Like it's supposed to be something so much more profound and so much more truthful than it is.
I mean, because movies like Hereditary and The Witch don't shove that down. They just present the story as it is. So
those are completely different. Those are like art house type of movies where they're going for a completely different aesthetic. It's not a crowd pleasing type of thing. It's a type of filmmaking that turns half the audience off. That's not what they're trying to do here. They're trying to turn all the audience on, and they're taking real life and kind of weaving it in there. And I didn't see anything that they kind of clubbed you over the head with. They just used real things that they said and did in their cases. I mean, you may argue, whether it's real or not. That's a whole different other discussion. But it is part of their story, and it is what they did. And then when I had a supernatural experience with demons and shit, it's the Bible that saved me. So okay, I don't know.
But that's from your perspective, though. Just remind, stuff like that is not actually proven. There's nothing wrong with believing it. It's just a lot of.
And I'm not saying I believe anything. I'm just telling you what happened. There was demons in my presence screaming at me in the face, and nothing stopped them until a Bible was brought in the room. That's just a fact.
It's a fact.
So I'm not saying what it was.
It's not a fact that happened.
But it is a fact that it happened. Okay, it's not a fact that I saw demons. That's up for debate. But it is a fact that religion, a Bible, stopped it, because it was either supernatural or mental. Either way, the Bible stopped it. So it does have some gravitas and some strength in these situations. It could be based on the person's personal beliefs, and I'm not that much of a religious person. I believe in a higher power, but I feel the presence of a higher power at times, and I felt the presence of evil.
See, and here's another thing. I've actually had supernatural experiences and moments like that, but I don't like to present them as that. I just say that's my experience. Take away from it what you. I don't know. I've had a really scary supernatural experience from when I'm younger. Was it in my head? I have no idea. I could not really tell you. I'm just being honest. But
yeah, I couldn't either. I mean, I've speculated, but I've never said definitely what it was, because I have no idea, and I have no there's no, it's beyond my realm of understanding, and beyond all of our realms of understanding. And by the way, everything that the Warrens dealt with is beyond our understanding.
Yeah, that's true. But also, I mean, here's another interesting thing about this case. I actually love the scene where Bruno gets attacked. I think that's probably the scariest sequence in the movie, is in the dog kennel. It's portrayed as they were just having a good time and it turned demonic. In the actual case, that guy who was Bruno, his name is slightly different in real life. I think it's Bono.
Yeah.
It's barely different. It's not like he was a drunk that they were all happy to be around.
He was being inappropriate with the girl.
Yeah. In real life, they went to lunch earlier in the day and they were already arguing and already had tension. And there was a moment where the girls went off and they tried to rush back because they had a feeling that violence was going to break out at any moment, because the guy kept getting more drunk. The other one kept getting more agitated. And I forgot who it was, but the lady said that she stood in the middle with them and tried to like stop them from attacking each other. This movie acts like it just came out of nowhere, like, oh, like they were all having a good time and then something supernatural happened. That already raises questions to the credibility of the case itself, because yeah, it's maybe there was actual demonic possession, but in reality, they were fighting the entire day, and it was a situation that kept escalating and escalating. And in court, it was mostly tackled as a case that came out of self-defense.
And that was in the original script. The exact way that it happened was the exact way it was in the original script. And they made the decision to change it purely for entertainment purposes, for cinematic purposes, because for that movie to work, for the story to work, you have to believe that Arnie's innocent. And then if they'd have showed all that, it would have put a nugget of doubt in your mind that maybe he was.
You know, that's fine. I actually don't have a problem personally, to be very clear, with taking liberties. These are movies. As first and foremost, they need to function as such. But that just makes the based on a true story gimmick a little bit harder for me to swallow. Say it's inspired by it. Stop trying to sell this like this is the true story, because it's not. A lot of people are going to walk away from this movie thinking that this is how the case actually played out and this is what happened. And the movie only solidifies this by playing the clips of the exorcism that kicks off the movie. I actually think the movie might have been better off just concentrating on that aspect, because that is actual historical record. The exorcism, everything up until that point. There's a point where you could have actually gone through historical record, but say it's inspired by a true story or loose, but to say that this is based on a true story and sell it as that is, it's
you talk as if that's going to be damaging to the public. I don't think so. I don't think anybody reads that much into it. I think most people don't even believe that the Warrens were real. You've seen the groups. I mean, I'd say 95% of the people believe that they were con artists.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think it's going to make any negative impact on society.
Maybe,
and I think
you're right. Maybe it won't. It just kind of, those elements annoy me. And it's just, none of that ever struck me in the first two Conjuring movies. And the first two Conjuring movies do center their Catholic religion very much in the film. It's a very driving force, and it does have a couple of scenes of dialogue. And then I think that's another thing. There wasn't enough to distract me away from that. Whereas with James Wan, and I know it's not going for elaborate set pieces, and I get that it's going for something more intimate, but to follow up what James Wan was doing, like those fucking set pieces, especially in the second one, were tense. They were drawn out. They made your heart race. They're scary as shit. I don't really respond to jump scares very well, and I respond to almost every one of the jump scares in The Conjuring 2. It gets me. And I just, like, I understand wanting to pare it down a little bit and not going to the same extent, but I feel like there had to be something scarier in it too, where I just felt like, okay, this mystery keeps going on, and instead of like engaging with the movie, it just like, wait, how is this possible? What is this? It doesn't make sense to me, because I was never scared, so I was being distracted by these story beats that otherwise I might not have been even cared enough to even look into, to be perfectly honest. But this movie did not scare me enough beyond the first 30 minutes. And it's disappointing to me, because the doll kernel scene almost ranks up, not quite, but it almost ranks with anything that James Wan does in the first two films. I think it's suspenseful, it's well acted, and it's very, very frightening. I just don't think, other than the morgue scene, there wasn't anything there that really jumped or scared me. What I did like about the end is mostly the relationship with the Warrens. I like the flashbacks. I like the end of it and the sweet romantic moment. And to be honest, I find it interesting, what actually more redeemed it towards the end was the pill moment. I thought that was a very endearing, touching moment. I care about the Warrens as film characters. I don't have as much of an opinion because I'm not going to pretend to know that much. I just know that what I've researched under this case, this movie took too many liberties, and I was not scared enough to not think about the liberties that were being taken. I was waiting. It just, the villain just did not work. It just was not scary, and I thought the climax was kind of a dud.
See, I disagree with all that.
Okay.
But except for it not being scary, yes, it wasn't as scary as, I mean, the guy is just not as, the director is just not as skilled at set pieces and scares like that as James Wan. But I still think there was enough, like, I counted 5 very memorable scenes for me, which I loved, and I liked even more the second time I watched it. So that's all I cared about, is that it had scary scenes, but not scenes that scared me, which is deviates far from Conjuring 1 and 2, because Conjuring 1 kind of scared me. Conjuring 2 scared the shit out of me. Mm-hmm. And this one didn't really scare me at all, but I was interested, I was invested. There were enough scenes in it peppered throughout. Like I even said, the blood shower, a little overused, and some other like cliche type of scenes, but overall I think peppered throughout was enough memorable scenes, like with the hallway scene in the kennel.
Mm-hmm.
And there was enough of them peppered throughout, and I actually loved the villain. I loved her whole look. I loved the way she was introduced. I love the whole mystery trying to find her. I love the whole story that the old man told about raising her, and I liked all of it.
I didn't like any of that. Really, it was after the certain point when it left like that courtroom and it started going off on this mystery, it started to seem wonky to me and a little shaky, and I just didn't think that was a very good or interesting reveal.
See, that's what makes me think that you and a lot of people hold the Conjuring movies up to a different precedent than all other movies. Because just the other day, you were telling me what a good movie Haunted was, or Haunt.
I'm not saying what a good movie
that you liked it.
I like it. I don't think it's that great. I don't like it as much as Joe Bob Briggs likes it. I don't think it's a masterpiece. I just think it's enjoyable.
And then when we discussed it, and I was telling all the reasons I didn't like it, I don't recall you having many complaints about it. And then for you to have so many complaints about something that was this well made, this well structured, well written, I thought it was a very good script.
I don't think this was well structured. I think the script was not very well structured. I think they should have thought it through and made a more compelling mystery out of it. I mean, that's just all subjective. And here, that's subjective too. You think it's well structured. It is not an empirical fact that it's well structured. I don't think it's well structured.
I went through many reasons why I thought it was well structured, and then all the critiques that you told me sounded like personal preference. It didn't tell me. It's just how it translated to you, but not like a shortcoming of the director or the script.
But of course, all critiques are how things translate to you. That's what perspective is. Even your critiques are what translates to you.
But of course, some of your critiques were the exact same problems that 1 and 2 had. So you're laying critiques on this one.
No. Let's talk about some of the critiques that don't. The set pieces, the mystery element, the draining of the epic qualities, the ham-fisted mystery part. Those are not really things that exist in the first two. I don't even see the first two as being mystery movies, and the structure being that. So
Yeah,
I don't know
that's
how
we discussed that. It was deliberately a different type of movie. The first two were haunted house movies. This was a
Okay,
deliberate
okay,
deviation from a
okay,
haunted house movie.
okay. You're right. They're different types of movies, and it's a deviation. But that's why that comparison doesn't work, because they don't apply to the first two. So I don't know how you could apply
No,
those.
so some of your main critiques, like the deviation from the original story, they probably deviated more in 1 and 2 than they did on this one.
Okay,
You
that is
said, yeah,
possible.
and
That is
you critique
possible. Okay, but
the
that,
use of
okay,
religious
wait.
iconography.
Yeah, that is true. What you're saying actually is true. That they wait, I lost my point. I lost my point. What were you saying right before that?
With your critiques on the first, it being deviating from the original story, which the first two did too, and probably
Okay,
more.
yeah. Why it doesn't count? Because the original two distracted me from this fact by scaring the shit out of me. So why it doesn't, why I was less
I get
compelled
that.
to read into it, is because the movie actually scared me. If the movies didn't scare me and I was getting bored by The Conjuring or The Conjuring 2, which never happened at any point, I might have gone back and said, wait, what's going on? How is this real? The fact that this doesn't scare me is why I went and researched more into it. Where the first two, I was just happy to accept the movies as they were and not really even think about it that deeply, because to me they were just awesome, scary horror movies. The reason why I start holding up higher standards is because since that one element is missing, that element that makes these really effective scary movies, I'm more likely to be drawn to other things to focus on.
So
So
are you gonna preemptively critique the first two then?
am I going to preemptively critique it? No, because I'm not. No, because if I go back and watch them again, and I've watched them each a couple of times, more so the first one, even though I like the second one more. They still scare me while it's going on. So it's not like those preemptive critiques could work, because any chance that I would have to scrutinize would be under the cut by the fact that it's too busy scaring the shit out of me to even care, if that makes sense. So
Yeah.
I couldn't preemptively critique those in any way, because I guarantee you, if I watch them again, I'll probably just be too invested to be even thinking about that. Especially in the second one, there are so many scenes in the second one that have me holding my breath, that have I'm in too tense and too jangled of a mind state to even be thinking about how true this is or how true this is. This movie did not do that for me. Therefore, I can only critique it that way, because I didn't get scared of it. I didn't get engaged with it, and I didn't feel any tension with it. That'd be fine if it's not scary, but I didn't even feel tension towards the end. And that felt to me like a big letdown, because I do think that the first opening sequence with the exorcism is awesome. I think the dog kernel scene is my favorite thing in here. And I also like the morgue scene a lot, although that does take place outside of the first 30 minutes. That's an effective scene. Other than that, the only things that I could latch onto were the romantic elements of the story, between Ed and Lorraine Warren. So other than the romantic elements, I kept thinking, wait, this twist, none of it just felt real or organic to me. And that's just the thing. It may not feel real or organic to me, but movies, like I said, are not real. If you can distract me while you're watching it, that I'm not going to be picking it apart, then you've done a great job, because I'm too scared to even think about the logic behind it or to think about the actual story behind it. Since this didn't engage me on it, I was naturally drawn to things that I normally wouldn't even be drawn to in a film like this, like breaking down the validity of it all, breaking down, wait, did this actually happen?
But still, you admit that the first two have the same problems that you had with part three. You just weren't aware of them.
Yeah, it might have the same problems, but it makes up for it because they're scary as shit. Because they have this unrelenting tension that never falters through the whole movie.
And see, in order to please you, he would have had to do a copy of what James Wan did. He wouldn't have been able to. Michael Chaves wouldn't have been able to do his own vision and his own approach to the Conjuring story and to the story of the Warrens.
That's fine. I just don't think his approach works.
Yeah, I think it did. I mean, I admitted from the beginning the scares aren't as effective, but the scares are there. They are scary, but it didn't scare me. And
And-
scary is subjective.
And here's another thing: the romance in this movie does work. It does work. I think it works less if you haven't seen the first two, and I think I don't know if that's a criticism, but for me, some of the power of the relationship that they have is something that that's built up from the previous films.
I disagree with that too, because they built it up from the beginning in this one too. There's several romantic moments throughout the movie.
There are, but you start off caring more because you're more invested in them from the first two films.
But they tell the whole story of them getting together and then use it in the climax. I mean, that you don't get it. You can't set up their romance any more than that. And I think they actually had more screen time than any of the other films. So if the Warrens is what you like about it, then you're saying you liked most of it. And the critiques, the main critiques you're having, like, and then the religious aspect of it, which was more prominent in the others, and especially part two. Part two was actually, the nun was created as an affront to Lorraine Warren's faith.
Mm-hmm.
And it was discussed a lot more. In here, it was some major lines that were shouted out during battle was the main time religion was ever discussed, and the other times it was one, maybe two lines. So it really wasn't really touched on a whole lot. It was just used in the battle.
Yeah. Well, it's just, I don't think it's a good mystery. I don't think it really functions well as a mystery film. And even if it did, let's say, assume that I thought that the mystery was good and that the script did a good job with it at the end, I would still think it's lacking compared to the first two, even if it did. But on that level, I didn't find any of that interesting at all. I just didn't. The mystery that they were going to, all of it felt like I never got that. I shouldn't get the nagging feeling like, why do I get the feeling that this is not the actual story? There's something that kept bothering me. And it was like, oh, that makes sense because it's not the actual story of what happened. It's just none of that. It just feels forced and kind of ham-fisted. And I don't like that last reveal about the daughter and the speech that the father gives. I thought that was kind of an eye roll moment for me.
Which one?
The speech at the end where he reveals his history with the daughter and how the church disapproved because because of the manner in which he had his daughter. It's just none of that just seemed believable or realistic or compelling or very interesting. It doesn't work. It just all felt very flat to me. I like the first 30 minutes and I like one scene and I like the romance, but a lot of it, I was just starting to lose my patience with a lot of it. And it never built up any of the same tension that it had in the first part of the movie. I don't think the movie ever recovers after it has a spectacular opening 30 minutes with stuff that could possibly compete with some of the stuff in the original.
Well, for me, I liked that it's different. I liked that it deviated from the other two. It had most of what I wanted from a Conjuring film and a little more that the other two didn't give me. It gave me more Ed and Lorraine Warren. The only thing that wasn't there was James Wan. That's literally exactly what you're saying.
But that's a huge,
because in order for it to be any better for you, James Wan would have had to direct it himself, and he just didn't. It was somebody else's vision.
Or they would have had to have put together a more thought through mystery, a more intelligently put together mystery.
I thought the mystery was very effective. I don't recall you ever explaining what was weak about any part of the mystery. I mean, the mystery of the totem, and then the other cop found a totem as well. So the whole mystery of finding where his murders occurred and finding that girl's body in the river, and then the whole finding the actual location of the villain. I was into all of it. I mean, I liked it.
It all felt like side stories or side trips. It never felt, I don't know. It's just that reveal. Like I said, they come in through a couple of visions. She says there's somebody there, but that isn't to me enough to really even build up the villain or to.
I already explained that. I mean, they built her up from the beginning. The whole.
Okay, but that's just
the
just
first
somebody's
vision,
there in a couple of visions is not a buildup.
The first vision is a whole visual representation of what that villain is, her lair and everything. And then she's mentioned several times throughout, and then she's revealed pretty early in the movie, and then the rest of it is the mystery about finding her location. So I have no idea what you're talking about there. That's simple as that.
It doesn't set a villain up in this movie. It just gives
It does.
No, it
That's
does.
all I can say. It does. And you haven't
a couple of visions and there's somebody there is not a setup.
See, and you're diluting what I just got through telling you. I just went through a whole spiel about every one of the scenes where they had the visions followed up by dialogue, and I don't know what else you want besides showing it. What good would it do? Why would it make it better to show this villain early? And they did show her pretty early. I mean, how much earlier did you want to show her?
It seemed like she's organically tied to the story and not just shoved in as a screenwriting element.
She is from the first one when they said someone is planting. Actually, when they first found the totem, you know that someone did it.
I know.
So,
but it's a mystery that you're only supposed to guess it was just somebody that she had a few hallucinations of, and there this person is.
That was kind of followed up in scene after scene. I mean, I can go back and outline them again for you, but
you could, but I think they're poorly followed up, though. I don't think they're good explanations.
Well, you haven't offered anything to.
Yes, I have, Michael.
Validate that.
I'm not saying
you haven't offered anything to. You haven't offered anything to validate those critiques.
Mike, yes, I did. It's just not from your point of view, and I'm going to cut this part on because we both had a different. We all both had a different way of looking at it, and you're trying to tell me that my way of looking at it is wrong and yours is right. I'm just saying we had different ways of looking at it. That's it. Okay, but you're also saying that I didn't explain. You do that every time I disagree. Stop saying that. I don't do that to you.
But you didn't explain.
Yes, I did.
I mean, tell me.
Very clear. It's not.
Tell me one thing you explained.
I explained that the visions are not enough to set up a villain because it's just a couple of visions.
And I followed that way. I followed that up to saying, how many visions there were, followed up by dialogue. We knew someone did it. Plus, the villain was actually shown fairly early in the story. I don't know what else. I don't know what else to tell you.
Okay, Michael, you're just, that's fine, but I can see how your point is valid, but you're saying that mine is not. I get that you like this movie, but my critique is valid just because I don't think it's well set up, and I've explained why, because those visions are not enough to even clue you in who this person is or why.
They were definitely enough for me. It's just we had different ways of looking at it. That's all.
Okay, but that doesn't make my critique any less valid. You could have said that earlier on.
No, I'm saying I outlined several reasons and explained the scenes. When you just keep saying, no, it wasn't good enough. It didn't set it up good enough for me, and you didn't explain why. You just said that a couple of visions don't set up the villain, and I'm like, well, the dialogue that was followed by that and showing her early in the story did. So,
but what did the dialogue say beyond anything generic and boilerplate to really clue you in or to make it a worthwhile mystery? What did they say in the dialogue?
What do you mean, like the guy who raised her telling the whole story, or
that comes so late in the movie? Like that comes.
We're finding out about this villain the same time as the Warrens are. That they find out that someone planted these totems there. They think, who did it? And we're thinking the same thing. Who did this? But it's tied to her visions from the beginning and showing her lair. I mean.
Okay, but here's the problem. Since none of that story is actually connected to this, it looks ham-fisted. It looks like they had to come up with something to make this story function in the way that it does. And what they come up with just doesn't seem to work because, oh, I had a vision. Oh, somebody's there. Oh, I had a vision. Somebody's there. And then late in the game, there's this big speech about the child that he hid and the reason that he did. That should have been interwoven a little bit more earlier to make that a more worthwhile mystery. It sets up that, yeah, something's happening and somebody's doing something, but it's nothing beyond anything that's just generic that you could apply to anybody. Somebody's up to something foul is afoot, evil is brewing. Okay, so this is a different part of the podcast. We both have calmed down. I think I took things a little too personal when Mike said that my critiques were not valid. I apologize. Sometimes we get into a little heated. I just wanted to be clear. The one thing that I wanted to say that, yeah, my critiques are biased. I think both of ours are. And the only thing I want to say with regards to that is I do my best to try to be objective when I'm reviewing these films. And as you saw earlier, even when I'm talking about Willy's Wonderland, as much as I don't like that film, I try to understand that it is a well put together film in a technical sense. And even if I personally don't like it, I realize a lot of hard work went into making it. Even films that you don't like had a lot of talent behind the camera. And again, I don't mean to be dismissive of anything in that fashion, even if I come across harsh. But I do want to say that, yeah, I do have some personal biases, but I think that we all do as reviewers, that we try to be as objective as possible and try to be fair. But at the end of the day, art is still a subjective experience, and it's based on your perceptions. It's going to be based on your life experiences. You bring as much to a movie as you take out of it. And I will say that, yeah, I am a little bit biased, but I think our perspectives are only valuable in the sense that there are perspectives. Otherwise, we would just be robots, just spitting out. This was good. Acting was solid. Direction was good. This was a good camera dolly move. There's value in that. I do think there's value in acknowledging the objective qualities, but a useful critique of art is always going to have your subjective personal experiences thrown in there. And my perception, admittedly, right or wrong, does color how I see the new Conjuring film.
And I did push the issue more than I ever would in a normal conversation. I mean, you've had one-on-one conversations with me. I never push like that on an opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And plus, I have an enormous history with this franchise. I mean, like I said, I studied the Warrens since high school, and I've always been fascinated by their cases, and I couldn't wait for the movie to come out.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a director that I liked, and it ended up being his best work, and it's still his best work to date. So I wanted 3 to be good so bad, and I was so disappointed that James Wan wasn't going to direct it. So I was so skeptical of it. And then just the fact that it affected me and I liked it, I was so happy about it. I'm probably biased towards it.
And yeah, and my bias, like I said, I have my biases. And look, I know that I can be skeptical when it comes to a lot of things that involve supernatural, despite having my own experiences, because I tend not to trust even my own intuition if it's not backed by evidence. But that doesn't mean I've never had my own experiences. And I normally, like I said, don't care. I'm happy to take a movie at face value. I guess because this movie did not scare me through most of its runtime, my brain started wandering to things that I normally would not pay attention to in a supernatural horror film, which is the accuracy of it. And like I said, a lot of me focusing on the fact came from the fact that the plot distracted. I found it distracting or not interesting or not engaging to me on a personal level. And I want to apologize out there. This movie was #1 at the box office, regardless of how I feel about it. I do think it's a good thing for horror because it followed up A Quiet Place 2, taking #1 at the box office. Both of these, like back to back, to have horror films be leading the resurrection of the box office, really. Like, it's nice to see that movies are making money again. So it's a good thing regardless. And I wanted one last thing. I apologize to Ronnie Jean Blevins. I love you, man. I had a hard time wrestling with my critiques with this movie because I have a friend who's in it. And I think Ronnie did an awesome job in this movie. I actually think his part is really memorable. And I think it's memorable also because a lot of other people would have just taken a part like that and just phoned it in and just kind of like, just let it be, where Ronnie actually did. And congratulations, man. That's awesome that you're in a big budget Hollywood film. #1 at the box office is going to get you a lot of exposure. So regardless what I think, go out and support horror regardless of what I tell you or what I think. I'm only here to give you my personal perspective. At the end of the day, the perspective that counts the most is yours.
Cool.
All right, so that's what I want to say. Sorry for the blow up. We've calmed down. We're smoking our bowls. I'm sure that plays a part in it too. But yeah, outro.
Oh. And I know that some of you out there are twisted, especially being horror fans. You're twisted and you love this stuff. So I admit that's another reason why I kept pushing you.
Yeah, you liked seeing us argue. And let's be honest, I'm not comparing myself to Siskel and Ebert because I'm not even going to do that. But Siskel and Ebert, I think everybody's favorite episodes of that show were the ones where they argued the most. I think that's probably the I think that's probably the most enjoyable parts of the shows. Now I'm ranting about Siskel and Ebert, but I think I heard somebody describe Siskel and Ebert as a sitcom about two guys who live in a movie theater and argue with each other, which I don't think is an inaccurate description. But yeah, so it's, like I said, whatever. I don't even know what I'm trying to say anymore at this point. All I want to know is peace. Love you guys. I know I got a little out of hand and I started getting pissy, but I've calmed down. Just to let you know.
All right.
So join us next week, folks. We're going to get into, we're going to continue our rounds of Horror Tubi Roulette, where we review the last couple of movies that we played on our last round. And if you don't know what Horror Tubi Roulette is, you'll see when we actually play it. Really simple. All we do is go on the free Tubi app that has a very loaded horror movie section. Close our eyes, scroll, kind of like a Wheel of Fortune. Just see where it stops. You lift the button, and whatever it lands on, for good or bad, you have to watch it. One thing I forgot to mention, we haven't mentioned on this podcast, we should. It's Pride Month. It's a celebration. At some point during the end of the month, we'll probably just give you some interesting LGBTQ horror movies that we really like or we really enjoy or worth recommending. But we just wanted to let you know we stand by the LGBTQ community. Any marginalized community out there, we stand by you, and we're sorry that we haven't gotten around to addressing that a little bit earlier in the month, but we've just been so hectically busy. Besides this podcast, Mike and I actually work together on freelance projects on the film that Michael is working on the previous film that Michael directed that we're trying to get distribution on, Pay Up. We're working on that right now. Michael wrote and directed this film, Pay Up. We've shown it in a couple of online festivals. It's a film that I produced with Michael and spent a lot of time editing. We're very, very passionate about it. We're trying to get it out. It's a little bit of a challenge, just so the audience is aware, because there's some shocking material in here we knew from the beginning that one particular sequence in this film was going to be a hard sell, but it's essential to the story, so there's no way that we're ever going to cut it or get rid of it. The movie would not be the same if it didn't have that centerpiece. And I know this centerpiece, and you'll know it when it happens, when you see the movie, what's keeping this movie from getting it's keeping us where we've had a lot of discussion with a lot of distributors who want to do it and they try to find it, but they always back away because of it. Mike and I are working on another script right now. Mike and I actually finished another script. We're going to pitch deck. Mike will be directing this film, and we're trying to shop it to Lionsgate or whoever gets it, but it'd be good. This one should be an easier sell because I think it's actually more brutal than Pay Up, and I think it's even more wrong, and I think it's more effed up. But I still think it's an easier sell because there is no set piece. I mean, don't get me wrong. We got some brutal kills for you. I think we went far to make it offensive and shocking, but there's nothing in there that compares in terms of the taboo that we touch on in Pay Up. And if I'm sounding vague, I apologize, but there's a lot of stuff going on. So we're working on that right now, pushing the podcast out, trying to get this onto different platforms like Anchor. We apologize to the audience. We keep saying that we're going to get this on Anchor. We will eventually get this on Anchor. Keep up with us. What else are we up to?
Well, I was just going to say that some people have been telling me just cut the scene and Pay Up, or just cut it down where it's not as graphic. That's not what I do. I would feel like such a sellout if I did that.
And I think it would lose, I don't know, it's too shocking to get rid of.
Everything in the movie kind of leads up to that bizarre, kind of weird moment that kind of shakes you up, and I couldn't imagine losing that.
Follow us on social media. Follow us on Facebook.com/Pickles Horror Show. Also, if you're interested, on Facebook, we have a group called Ghostman and Rivera's Horror Show Podcast that you're welcome to join. Either Mike or I will approve you. And in this group, you can ask us questions. You can submit movies or ideas for the podcast or topics that you think are interesting that you want us to tackle. But don't just mistake this group just for centering on our podcast. It's meant to be for just the horror community at large, and you're welcome if you're part of the horror community, if you're trying to get a project off the ground, or if you're doing any work like that, you are more than welcome to join our group and promote it, and we'll share and we'll discuss it. So it is our podcast group, but it's a group for you as well. I don't want to misconstrue it. You could talk about anything horror related in there. You just have a little bit more access to us as well. At Pickles Horror Show on Instagram. Last but not least, if you want to check out everywhere we're available, click the link in, and I put this in every podcast description. It's our flow page. If you can't click it, just copy and paste it. It'll give you access to the podcast on YouTube, on Spotify, on SoundCloud, and Apple Podcasts. And like I said, soon enough, we're going to get it on Anchor, Podbean, and several other platforms. Till next week, folks, happy horror.
Happy horror.